Hello and welcome to another episode of Transport in Africa, a podcast dedicated to spotlight cutting-edge research, innovation, and ideas shaping transport systems across Africa. I am your host, Polycarp Chebe. In each episode, we sit down with a researcher, practitioner, or change maker who is redefining how mobility works in Africa. In today's episode, we are turning our focus to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to explore the world of paratransit, or call it informal public transport, a crucial but often overlooked dimension of public transport. In a city where informal and semi-formal transport systems dominate, understanding how to make public transport more efficient, reliable, and equitable is crucial. We will examine the current paratransit landscape in Addis Ababa, the challenges faced by the sector, and the opportunities of integrating electric buses into the existing transport system. Joining me is Gashua Abera, a transport professional at the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, ITDP, Africa. He brings deep experience working on urban mobility in Ethiopia and beyond. Hi, Gashua. Welcome to the show.
Yes, hi, Chebe. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here with you. Thanks.
To start, Gashua, could you briefly introduce yourself and share your professional background along with ITDP's work in supporting public transport reforms in Addis Ababa and in other African cities?
Okay, thanks so much again, Chebe. Yeah, I'm Gashua Barra. I'm working with ITDP Africa. I'm the active mobility manager for the Africa team, studying urban and regional planning for my bachelor degree. And then I also done my master's in South Korea and University of Seoul, and the scope of urban administration and planning with the focus on sustainable mobility. I've been working with the government for the preparation of Addis Ababa City Master Plan from 2012 to 2017, the new Addis Ababa City Master Plan. I was the team leader for transport and road network planning. And after that, after studying my master's, I have joined ITDP. Over the past 8 years, I've been working with the team here in ITDP. ITDP is an NGO, a global organization that's working in different transport and planning, urban planning sectors, and also electrification of mobility. So ITDP has been working, especially here in Ethiopia, where I'm based in Addis Ababa. We have supported the government in terms of developing the non-motorized transport strategy, the Addis Ababa Cycle Network Plan. And recently, we've been doing a lot of works also on the street design manual and electrification of bus, which Cheve, you were also part of while you're doing your internship here. And throughout different African countries, we basically do projects that are related with sustainable urban mobility, focusing on walking and cycling, public transport, electrification of public transport, and also 2- and 3-wheelers. ITDP is a global organization as well, so our head office is located in New York. So we have offices all over the 5 continents, and here in Africa, our headquarters is in Nairobi, and we have offices in different 6 countries. But yeah, our work is not limited only on the 6 countries. We work in Western, Southern, and Eastern African countries. So yeah, that's basically about ITDP and myself, Jebe.
That's right. Interesting to see how ITDP is working to revamp transport systems, not only in Africa, but across the globe. Gashua, for our listeners who may not be familiar, can you give us a brief overview of the paratransit landscape in Addis Ababa, and more broadly, how paratransit operates in other African cities?
So here in Addis Ababa, the paratransit system, primarily they consist of the minibuses. So you know the blue and the white, the blue and the white ones. So we call them minibus taxis. They actually dominate the largest share of the public transport operation here in Addis. So just to give you the overall actually mobility situation or the mobility share in Addis Ababa, most people here in Addis Ababa and also in different secondary cities, they use walking and cycling as the primary mode. So more than 50% of residents here in Addis Ababa use walking as a daily mode. And as a paratransit and the other public transport consisting regular buses and the light rail consists around 15%, around 31%, I'm sorry, and the remaining 15% is for private cars. So that's more or less the overall mobility in Addis. And when talking about paratransit, they kind of have different informal routes that they use in different cases. So people prefer them to use minibuses instead of regular buses. So we have a lot of residents or travelers that are using minibuses and share taxis throughout Addis Ababa. And yeah, there are different cases. Recently, Addis Ababa has done a lot of works in terms of making them more formalized. Because earlier, like in 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we used to have, like a lot of these minibuses starting to do operation on corridors where there is a demand and where they have, like a lot of passengers and leaving out some of the corridors that should be served with this public transport system. But now the government is regularly controlling their trips and they have dedicated routes and even the fare collection system is also decided by kilometer. So the government controls all the routes, the fare collection and everything. So they are providing a good service in terms of their operation. So that's what I could say. And when it comes to the other African countries, so it's there is also similarity in some of these countries. What makes them different is how they are managed. So here, I mean, in Addis Ababa, you could see that the government has full control of the overall operation and do the management system. And in some cases, some of our other African countries, they have also the matatus and these minibuses operating in their city, but the overall difference is like how the government do the controlling and the regulations and the organizations of the SACCOs or the associations themselves. So yeah, the character varies from place to place, from region to region, and from countries to countries. But the most important thing to notice is they serve a lot of demand. They fill the gaps in the transport demand here in Africa. So they have a good role, I mean, in terms of serving that.
Interesting, Gashua. I think, like, from my own experience with paratransit, particularly in Cameroon and Nigeria, I discovered the paratransit operators, they have unions. I don't know whether it is the same in Addis Ababa.
True, yeah. Here also in Addis Ababa, there are different unions. So they call them associations, the taxi minibus associations, and depends also on the geographic location. So, for example, if there is this major transport hub, let's say on the eastern part of Addis, there is some specific name there around the terminal and they have these associations. Usually these associations helps, I mean, in terms of communicating with the government, like when there is something wrong with the operation or when they think also the price of the public transport needs to increase. So like instead of, like each of these individual taxis approaching to the transport bureau, these associations helps, like to communicate between the government and the taxi operators or the minibus taxi operators. So yeah, they exist and their role also is more of the management side and then have that discussion with the government. Yeah.
Gashua, what are some of the key challenges facing the paratransit sector in Addis Ababa? Maybe in terms of operations, policies, infrastructures, and public perception.
Speaking like as a person who've been using also this paratransit throughout my life here in Addis, one of the issue I would say is also the vehicle quality. Like that discourage, like users. I mean, people prefer to use maybe shared taxi. Like I prefer maybe to use shared taxi or my own car, try to buy my own car, which I would do because of the issues of the vehicles themselves. So most of our vehicles that are supporting this paratransit are old and aged cars, and they are not safe also on the road. So usually those are the major issues. That's why people probably don't want to use that. Like you used to have many passengers in one vehicle, like more than what what it's supposed to hold. So that's also a reason for causing a lot of traffic crash here in Addis Ababa, where the public transport. But now recently it's reduced because of the management, but that's also one factor. that's kind of a challenge to use the paratransit. Other than that, yeah, drivers' behavior also that's a different case because they sometimes they drive fast, like whenever there is no traffic police around. So that's also another factor, like people wants to feel safe while traveling. Yeah, I could say a little bit of maybe harassments and stuff for a woman passengers, but that's also a bit of relief now because of the serious control and regulations here in Addis Ababa. In terms of the infrastructure itself, through this new developments here in Addis Ababa, now the minibuses have a lot of stations, like a place where they could, like load and unload passengers. So that has given a relief in most of these larger corridors. But in some areas, like there are no stations and there are no proper locations to stop and then to wait for a public transport. Like there is no shelter for a shed when passenger, or passengers wants to wait for public transport. So those could be the challenge for public transport infrastructure. But in general, I think things are improving here in Addis, but the issues remains the same in different other African countries that also need to do, similar projects to make sure that the paratransit system is operating well. And yeah, the longer solution, and then also from our side as well, we have done several projects to make sure that this public transport system have a good reform, like, and then we have suggested and also supported different government partners. I mean, in terms of making sure that this paratransit operates well, and also that in most of our cities also we have the cities plan, like for a longer term solution, which requires them to do with the larger scale public transport, like using BRT system. And this paratransit could also serve as a good a good feeder to the systems.
Gashua, I was in Addis Ababa some few months ago and I had the chance to attend some stakeholder meetings on the government's effort in pushing for a transition to electric buses. Could you walk us through the current efforts toward this transition? Who is involved and what progress has been made so far?
Yes. So yeah, that's correct. And yeah, I think as you know also, JB, yeah, we've started working on this project for the EBAS formalization in Addis Ababa. So ITDP is also one of our pillar and one of our main work here in Ethiopia is also on the electrification of public transport. So through that project, and together with you, we have done an existing assessment, right? Like trying to understand like how the overall institution works. And not only that, also like the different entities and their roles and everything. We have tried to assess like the existing environment. And we could say also here in Addis Ababa, I think the government in general and through the Addis Ababa city administration, they have made a bold move in terms of, like starting operation of electric buses here in Addis. So around hundreds of electric buses have started to work here in Addis starting from April 2025. So the conversation and the purchasing and all the operation discussions have been started, I guess, around 2024, like start of 2024. But they have made this bold move and they have been also working together closely with the private sector and vehicle assembly companies here in Addis Ababa. And yeah, through the PPP system and through the some discussion on how to handle the operation between the government and this public transport operator, yeah, the government has done a good job. I mean, in terms of making, I mean, at this, I think the now the main like one of the main cities, like that has done this bold move. In addition to what the government has done in terms of improving the walking and cycling facility, they have done this public transport improvements, I could say. And it's also, like there is there is a large and high demand for public transport system here in Addis Ababa. So the government has done a lot of actually purchasing of different type of buses to fill the gap. But having this electric bus is a plus also because it's also a solution, like for the environment issues that we always want to tackle. So I could say that, yeah, there is a good progress here, and the actors are both the government and some private sectors that have been working on this.
Okay, Gashra, how are local operators responding to the electric bus transition? Are there concerns or resistance from within the industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we've never done any stakeholder discussion that particularly reflects on that. But like from what I would imagine, I would assume that even these paratransit operators or the existing public transport operators would be very happy to do a transformation into a clean mobility or into a clean vehicle if opportunities are provided. But the thing is, like, it requires, like some economic visibility, like the owners of these old vehicles needs to also have, like some financial opportunities to purchase some of them. So if there is a possibility, like to link this existing operators with, like someone in the industry that could provide, like, I don't know, longer term loan or any type of financial support, I would assume that most of these vehicles would be happy to transform into the electric uh, mobility. But yeah, since we don't have any specific data or we never had any interview on this specific topic, I couldn't say like they're happy or not. So, but I would imagine that they would be much interested to transform to electric mobility.
It's interesting, like from my own experience in other parts of Africa, I think we have discovered issues of anxiety, like some local operators are not really certain of how this transition is going to look like, how it will work for them, whether they'll be able to have the financial capability of meeting up to this expectation. As a follow-up, I would just like you to shed light on this issue of support for this transition. From your perspective, what kind of support do you think is necessary to ensure a just and successful transition to e-mobility, especially for the small informal bus operators?
Yeah. So yeah, from my side, I would say it should all start from policy making, right? So one of the key benefits, I mean, in terms of having a good policy that supports the sustainable urban mobility, like when the government starts securing funding for some of this infrastructure development, the policy could be one of the things that they always check, like, did our policy allow us to do this or not? So if you keep, like some of this the major transformation, I could say, in terms of the sustainable urban mobility, I would go with policy making first. So that's definitely is going to be the most important thing, like to help transforming into electric mobility or to make also good decisions in terms of improving your walking and cycling infrastructure. So yeah, from where I am here, like I'm always proud of some of the existing improvements that are happening in terms of walking and cycling infrastructure. And you are also, I think, happy, Chebe, to see some of this transformation here in Addis because it's like one of the most miracle work, I could say. Like they have done a lot of good jobs in terms of expanding the walking, cycling, and people are enjoying all this infrastructure, including the public spaces. And when it comes to electric mobility, I think that's also another interesting thing that we have seen. Like if there is a serious policy, and also it requires also a good decision-making capability, like from the I'm not a government person, like I will not speak on the behalf of the government, but I would say like that what make it different here in Addis is like there is also a good linkage between the policy making and also the actual implementation on the ground. So whatever strategies that we have done on non-motorized transport or electric mobility, there is, like a willing to do the implementation on the ground because yeah, also the government, I mean, in other African countries should also consider, like taking into they need to take into consideration of, like making sure like whether first is to check whether those policies are correct or not. And then have, like make sure that also we are doing the right infrastructure development for the citizen because in parallel, different government agencies they have different focuses in their implementation on implementing different infrastructure. Some governments, some countries probably would focus on doing more highways, like to facilitate economic. So there is no problem of having many highways. But for example, on some cities, they focus also on people and then, like try to implement. They're both doing infrastructure development, but the type of development is different. So the attention, I mean, the policies and everything, if you keep, putting people-centered policy developments, like having NMT strategies, electrification strategies, and all those things, then the attention and the budget securing would focus on that. If you continue working on, like building more highways and do the other side of the transport infrastructure development, then you will get all the traffic crash, the pollutions, and all those things that we want to avoid. So it's always important to link the policy and the implementation side of it. So that's how I could say it.
To hear you already shed light on some of the non-motorized transport developments going on there in Addis Ababa. But for the meantime, I will say we will keep this conversation for another day. Gashua, looking ahead, what role do you think public transport, both formal and informal, should play in shaping the future of African cities?
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's an important question as well. So yeah, the public transport in general has a major role, like in terms of facilitating the economy in the country, right? So yeah, the transport, whatever modes of transport that you're using, it will facilitate the existing economic situation. And yeah, the paratransit, when specifically talk about paratransit, I think, as I told you, they are doing the largest share, I guess, more than 60% of the public transport system here in Addis. Like from all the public transport modes, almost 60% and more. We have to check the recent data, but that's how from the previous, look up the past 5 years. That's how these paratransits are operating here in Addis Ababa. And they have they're accommodating the largest share, and their contribution is undeniably like it's a major, they have done a major contribution, like to help people move around the city. And yeah, so the overall mobility in Addis Ababa has been supported by this paratransit. So I would say they have a good role, but also in a longer term, with the increase in the urbanization and also increase in the demand for transportation, like, like as a resident, I have noticed that over the past year, like there is this huge demand in public transport. A lot of people are waiting for public transport on station. And that reflects, like there is a demand in terms of transportation. And the role of these minibuses and the paratransit is undeniable. So they've been doing a lot of job. But to make sure that they are serving also efficiently and in a good quality, there is also a need, like to rethink about the existing mode in terms of reshaping them or reforming them in terms of, like you were saying, for example, the country needs to start also to focus more on a high level, high capacity public transport system like BRT, which we are promoting here in Ethiopia and elsewhere where we have this demand. So we've done several projects actually to help the government in terms of building this public transport system. Compared to metro and the light rail, they are economically also cheaper, and that's why we advise for African cities. And the paratransit also could still support the existing public transport system and support, like this BRT system as a feeder. So we probably need to also on these areas or locations where you have a higher demand for public transport, we should be introducing BRTs and other public transport system that could have a higher capacity, and the paratransit could still operate with a good quality, possibly change to electric mobility if possible, because the vehicle qualities, as I mentioned earlier, are really bad here. So that way, I think we could have a quality system and still the operation will continue. Yeah.
As someone who has closely followed the trends in the evolution of public transport in Ethiopia, what lessons can other African cities learn from the case of Addis Ababa, especially when it comes to balancing public transport formalization with inclusivity and sustainability?
Yeah, I would say there are also other good examples from other countries that Addis Ababa needs to apply. Addis Ababa could be used as an example for few African cities, but Africa, I mean, from public transport side, I think Addis Ababa also had a lot of things to learn, like from cities and countries like Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, and Senegal, Dakar, recently having BRT, EBRT fleets, like throughout its different corridors. So those are some of the amazing stories that we also want our decision makers to have a vision of when it comes to the public transport side. And from the achievement of Addis Ababa city, I think so far the city is doing a lot of work in terms of doing, like proper preparation for introducing BRT system. But also with the existing paratransit, they have done also a lot of management system. For example, as I was mentioning to you earlier, even if the quality of these vehicles are not good, the government through Addis Ababa Transport Bureau, they have done a lot of work in terms of making sure that these public transports are on time on a specific location, on a specific station. So they assign different controlling team in different station location and making sure that they are not also doing, like overloading. And I'm sure also they're doing a vehicle inspection these days. And that's also could help, like making sure that we only keep the good vehicles, because at the end we are moving people and we need to move them safe. So there are a few good things that we could learn from Addis Ababa, but as a public transport, Addis Ababa also should learn a lot from Dakar and Dar es Salaam, which has done a good job in terms of improving their public transport system.
Gashua, before we wrap up the show, is there anything else you would like to share?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks, Chebe. I guess today's topic is more on paratransit, and I appreciate first actually that you get this initiation in terms of making this podcast that discussed on paratransit, public transport, and in general about sustainable urban mobility. I really appreciate the initiative, and I'm happy also to have this discussion with you. The final thing I would say is, yeah, cities in Africa, they are in different scale of development. And yeah, some cities will probably do a lot of good works in terms of improving its walking and cycling facility like Addis Ababa. And some other cities like Dar es Salaam and Dakar doing public transport system, they have done a good job in terms of improving their public transport system, which is an exemplary for most of us. And yeah, there are also different examples from different countries that each cities should learn. But in general, I would say here in ITDP, we help cities, like to have more of sustainable urban mobility transportation system. And that is basically what I could say, like my overall, I mean, in terms of myself and also as ITDP, we focus, like to enhance and to promote public transport reform in these different cities, and also focus on accessibility and sustainability being as a main pillar. So recently, we have different, we have mainly three different targets or goals that as ITDP that we're working on. One is to help, like cities increase their public transport system. The second one is to focus also electrifying this public transport and the 2 and 3 wheelers. And the third is also working on the financial or fundraising activities. So these key three activities are the main activities that we're considering to help, like reaching out and work with this closely with the government and community to implement a more effective transport system. So yeah, there is no one city with full example that I could mention to you. This is just one example for walking and cycling, but there are other cities for public transport and others that we could use as an example.
brings us to the end of this episode of your podcast on transport in Africa. Gashua, thank you very much for sharing your insights into the world of paratransit in Addis Ababa and across the continent. I wish you all the best in your professional journey.
Thanks so much, Chebe, and thanks for having us. Yeah.
If you enjoyed this episode or learned something new, please consider subscribing to our page. You can also contribute by sharing this podcast with friends and colleagues who are interested in transport and mobility issues in Africa. If you are a researcher or practitioner working on transport in Africa and would like to share your work on this platform, feel free to reach out to me at chebe.chesifu@campus.technion.ac.ir and we can discuss how to future your work on this show. Until next time, I am your host, Polycarp Chebe. Thanks for listening and bye-bye.